Hello, Caroline Westall here, and today I would like to talk to you about your eyes. So, I'm a nutritional therapist and iridologist, and an iridologist is somebody who studies the coloured part of the eye, the bit you can see when you look in the mirror. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about that today to give you an insight as to what the kind of things I would look for if I was doing an iridology consultation, but also some things that you can look at when you're next passing a mirror and have a moment, so you can get a sort of different understanding or a little bit more insight as to how things work in your body. So with iridology, I use a handheld magnifying glass to have a look at the structure of the eye, the bit that you can see in the mirror. And essentially, I'm looking at the most colourful muscle that you have in your body. So the eye, the iris, is a muscle, so it expands and contracts. You've got the pupil, which is the hole going down through the middle, and then you've got that coloured bit, the iris, which expands and contracts depending on the light. So it's basically a muscle with radiating fibres going out from the hole, the pupil, and I look at how those different fibres are arranged. Sometimes they can diverge in sort of little structures like this. They can have wiggles, they can have different colours on the fibres. So sometimes they're white and sometimes they're a bit darker. So having a look at those structures just gives me an indication as to actually what's going on inside the body. So with iridology, it's a diagnostic tool. So it's a way of helping seeing how all the different organs and tissues are sort of interacting and working inside the body. And it's really, really fascinating. The eyes really are a window to the soul, because as well as that physical side, so looking at the different organs and tissues, it can also give an insight as to behavioural tendencies and all those little foibles that we have, and different ways that we as our unique being need to stay in balance. So all the fibres and structures of the eye are set in your early years. A lot of it's set when you're in the womb, but sort of around about 6 or 7 is when those fibres really are sort of set in stone, and the majority of the colour as well. So I don't know whether you've had little ones and you've noticed when they're born, their eye colour changes as they develop, sort of round about to a year. So sometimes you can be born with almost like a bluey browny eye, and then it can change either to brown or more to blue. So the eye can change a little bit in those early years, but essentially the fibres are quite sort of static. They tend to stay the same. And so by looking at how those fibres are arranged and also the colouring interacts, just gives me an insight as to how your system is. And we all have weaknesses that are passed down the generations, but when you know what those weaknesses are, it's really easy to support them. So obviously I use nutrition, but to keep them in balance. But just because you have a weakness does not mean that it needs to express itself as a symptom, as an issue. So let's start on the interesting bit. So there are 3 different eye colours. So this is the first thing to look at. So obviously there's blue, which I have, and then there's really dark true brown. And this eye colour originates from sort of the equator and sort of those little latitudes nearer the equator where the sun is much stronger and you need the melatonin to protect the eye. So they're really, really dark brown, uniformly brown, sometimes quite hard to read as an iridologist because there is that brown sort of film over the eye. And then in between, which creates the most unique or just remarkable eye colours, is the mixed eye. So it's called a biliary eye. And that's where you get sort of a morphing and a blending of both brown and blue, but essentially they're blue, so you've got blue underneath and then different layers on top giving different colours. So you can get greens and hazels and all sorts of variations in that. And so if you're not sure whether you're brown or mixed eye, have a close look in the mirror, and if you can see mottling or any sort of slight lightening in the colour, then you'll most likely have a mixed iris. Often with mixed iris, you can see sort of like a ring going just sort of near the edge of the iris colour, you can see sort of like a little furrow going around there. So that's something to look out for. So have a really close peep and see if you can determine what eye colour you have. Other things that you can see in the eye, so I talked about how the organs interact and also behavioural traits too. So there are some very general health issues that are linked to those 3 different eye colours and behavioural traits too. So I'll just summarise them really quickly now, just a few of the key ones to give you an idea. And these are general, obviously, they're not specific to an individual, but they're very general. So with blue eyes, tend to love to look up to the sky, need to be outside in nature, sort of a bit floaty and all over the place. Health-wise, a greater tendency maybe towards inflammation, things like arthritis. Generally need to avoid too much dairy and too much sugar because of the inflammation that's sort of quite common in blue-eyed people. The real true brown eyes sort of need to be grounded, like to be around family, sort of need that earthiness to them. Generally in the true brown is that they don't get ill very often, but when they do, it's sort of slightly more deep-seated and sort of takes a little bit longer to work through the system. Brown-eyed people tend to sort of hold tension and emotions in the digestive system. So it's really looking to support that area with foods like beetroot, onions and garlic for that internal support there. And then in the middle, you've got the mixed eye colour, so the biliary eye. And these just depends on the colour. So sort of tends to be if you have a greeny coloured eye, that your kidneys and your urinary system needs nurturing and looking after. So making sure you're keeping your fluids up. But also that your gut health needs looking after because they're very interlinked, those 2 systems. So making sure you're having the good bacteria, that's really important. If you're sort of more the hazily, occasionally that can indicate sort of digestive disturbance, so more prone to gas and not digesting your food quite so well. But both of those, sort of anything in that mixed eye colour, need to be creative. You need to have a creative outlet like drawing or painting or singing or playing an instrument or something like that, because you can be one or the other, that you need to have sort of that, not in your body, you need to just have that soul nourishment a little bit more. So we all have our thing that we need to do in order to keep us balanced, but maybe singing is for you if you've got that mixed eye. So, and then if we look on the physical side and the structures that I can see if I'm doing an iridology consultation. So I try and explain sort of how things are configured in the eye. And it's not that difficult in simplified ways. So the left eye relates to the organs and tissues in the left-hand side, and the right eye, the right-hand side. And then if you think about the eye, if you divide it in half, sort of the top half of the eye relates to the top half of the body, and the bottom half of the eye, the bottom half of the body. So in that way, it's very simple. And also concentrically as well. So I was talking about the black pupil in the middle of the iris. So that's a hole, essentially, and that can get bigger and smaller depending on the light. But that hole represents the tube that goes right the way from our mouth downwards through our body. And then if you think about the body, just outside that tube is the digestive system, and it's the same in the eye. There's a ring around the pupil which represents the stomach and the intestines. And in some people you can see a very defined division between that. Sometimes it's white between the digestive system and all the other organs and tissues. But in there, if you see some coloration right next to the pupil, sometimes there can be a lovely yellow, almost like a sunshine yellow. Sometimes brownie, just indicates that there is a tendency towards maybe imbalance in the gut, that you really need to nurture your digestive health. When you go out from the digestive system, if you think about the body, you then got all the organs and the tissues. And this is where it gets a bit complicated, because in this area in the eye, the organs are all positioned at different, it's like a clock face at different positions sort of around the iris, and it's a little bit more tricky for me to explain that to you at the moment, but you might be able to see sort of mottling and colour differences, which is always interesting and beautiful to see. And then an area that you hopefully will be able to see in the mirror is right round the edge of the iris. So you might be able to see on my eye that I've got quite a dark rim round the edge. So this represents the skin area. And ever since I was little, skin has been something that I've had to nurture. So I had eczema when I was little. I've got really sensitive skin, which is great because it's a good way of preventing me putting toxins into my body that aren't necessary. So I need to look after my skin health. So things like skin brushing, exercise and sweating and using natural skincare is really important. If you can see that, it's called a scurf rim. So right the way around the edge of the pupil, not the pupil, sorry, the iris, right the way around the edge of the coloured bit is the skin. So you really need to look after your skin. It's very important. Other things that you can see right the way around the edge, one very common thing as we age, sometimes we can get almost like a milky white sign. Sometimes it's just at the top, a little crescent at the top. Other times it can go right the way around the eye or just part of the eye. And that, as we age, just can indicate that maybe our cholesterol levels need addressing, just looking at maybe we need to introduce some more good fats into our diet and be careful of trans fats and the not so desirable fats, just to keep the balance in the body. So I hope that's given you a little insight as to some of the things that you could see in your eyes if you look in the mirror next time, or maybe you're looking at friends and family too, just secretly. But each eye is so unique. There are no two the same. They're like fingerprints. Even twins don't have the same eyes, so they're utterly beautiful. I love eyes so much. They really are just an inner sort of reflection of what's going on internally. And you can definitely tell, which hopefully you've noticed, that if somebody's really excited by something, they get a little twinkle in their eyes, or a mischievous twinkle, or if they're not feeling very well, their eyes can go dull or flat. So they really are reflecting what's going on internally. So they're a good diagnostic tool. But if you have any questions at all, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. If you found this interesting, I'd also love to hear from you. And please share if you know of anybody who might like to learn a little bit more about their eyes. Thank you for tuning in today. You take care. Bye-bye.